Hello, Class 4B in Tubingen. My name's Steve, and I'm in Sydney, Australia, which is a long way away from you guys. I think I measured it at 16,500 kilometers, so quite a distance. Your teacher has asked me to talk to you about my work in the space industry. So, my job is to support the world space agencies. Some of those are like NASA, the more famous ones. Now I'm going to put up a picture of me on the screen of me at NASA there. Maybe the most relevant ones close to you are the European Space Agency and DLR from Germany. There's also the Japanese Space Agency, and I work with all of those as well as the agencies in India at the moment and Vietnam. Pretty much every country has a space agency to manage their government and industry activities. So what do space agencies do? Well, quite a lot. The first thing they need to do is get to space, so many of them have rocket programs for developing and launching rockets. The purpose of those is usually to put some kind of machine into space. That might be machines that go to Mars and drive around. You've probably all seen the Curiosity rover. For me, the most important ones are the ones that study the Earth. So we would call those satellites, Earth observation satellites. And the most important applications of those are for climate, for weather, for agriculture, all kinds of reasons. And there are three main types of satellite application that space agencies get involved with. One is communications, and that's quite a big business, sending data around the world for live sport, for telecommunications, all kinds of data transfer reasons, including the internet. Then there's navigation. I think you've all heard of GPS. Even the Google Maps on your iPhone is using GPS or Galileo, which is the European version of that. And the third is Earth observation, and that's what I work in, and that's what I consider to be one of the most important applications of satellites. So I'm going to put up a little animation for you to see how many satellites there have been in the history of launching satellites into space. Before 1957, the Earth had one satellite. It was a natural one, and it's called the Moon. And we did not have the power in our rockets to achieve the escape velocity from the Earth, which is about 11 kilometers a second. You have to get a rocket up to about 11 kilometers a second to escape the gravitational pull of the Earth. So between you and me, that would mean 25 minutes traveling 16,500 kilometers to Sydney, to Tubingen. It's extremely fast. And so it took us some time, 1957 or thereabouts, until we could actually launch satellites at a speed that got them into the Earth's orbit. And the Russians launched Sputnik 1. And you can see how many satellites have been launched since then. I think more than 10,000. And it's growing every day as satellites get smaller and cheaper. We're getting these huge constellations, which is groups of satellites being launched at the same time. Of those 10,000, about 5,000 are still in orbit. Some have fallen out of orbit and burned up. 2,000 of those are still working, I think. And hundreds of those are for Earth observation purposes in different kinds of orbit. Sometimes they're very high, and you would get the picture of the full disk of the Earth like we use in weather forecasting. Sometimes they're quite low, so you can get a closer in picture at high resolution, and that's the kind of images that you would see in your Google Maps on your iPhone or your computer. So what do we do with all this data? With all these sensors that we have on these satellites, from these hundreds of Earth observation satellites? Well, there are all kinds of sensors up there. Some are simple cameras to give you photographs of the kind that you and I would understand. Some use radar, some use infrared, some use microwave information to pick up the different characteristics of the Earth. There are sensors for land, there are sensors for the ocean, there are sensors for the atmosphere. And you can imagine all kinds of purposes for these. Maybe the most well-known is weather forecasting. satellites made a huge difference to the accuracy of the weather forecast that you and I would see on the TV in the evening. And that's the number one application. But then climate is another one, measuring the ice caps and the changes in the ice caps over time, measuring the temperature of the atmosphere, the temperature of the land, climatic effects like the El Nino, which tells us that the weather is going to be sometimes extreme in different parts of the world, measuring the amount of crops which are grown in fields, so that either for prediction purposes or for the food market purposes, working out if there's going to be major problems in different parts of the world around food security. Disasters is another one, keeping an eye on cyclones, if there are earthquakes, working out where the land has changed and by how much. There are a whole range of different applications of Earth observation satellites. And my job is to help manage some of these programs and to make sure that the world's space agencies are contributing the data that we need to do some of these jobs. And some of them are extremely big. For example, the world's forests are over many countries and basically span almost all of the globe, other than some very highly deserted countries or the polar ice caps. And we know that the loss of trees through deforestation, either for the wood industry or for industries which want to grow crops in wooded areas like soy, cotton around the Amazon or in other parts of the world, those trees were saving us from a lot of carbon emissions. They were absorbing a lot of carbon, which contribute to climate change and the warming of the atmosphere. So they reckon that deforestation is about 15% of our annual carbon emissions. So knowing how many trees are lost each year is really important to predicting the climate in the future. So something I've been doing for the last 10 years is called the Global Forest Observations Initiative, and you can see in the video there some of the activities around that. Basically, we try and track the loss of forests around the world so the countries can make annual reports and we can get the big picture. And not only satellites can do this. Satellites going around and around the Earth can map the world every single day. There is no possible other way to do that, and that's why satellite Earth observation is so important. You can see in the animation some of the data from the Amazon, which showed you once the logging road has opened up, over the years, over the decades, more and more trees getting cut away. So that's a little flavor of what I do. I might leave you with a link on the screen if you want to get more information about the Copernicus program, which is the European Union and European Space Agency activity in Earth observation. It's one of the biggest programs in the world, extremely impressive, all kinds of satellites for all kinds of purposes, funded by the European taxpayer. And it's a massive contribution to what's going on in Earth observation. So I hope that's been helpful for you, and I wish you luck in your study of the space and satellite area that your teacher's working through with you. It's been nice to talk to you from Sydney. Bye-bye.